The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Hey everybody, welcome to the program. This is All You Can Eat. It is the podcast about deliciousness. I'm your host, Rob Rosenthal, coming to you tonight live for episode number 80. Wow, that's not bad. Number 80 of All You Can Eat. I am thrilled to have you all here with me. In the middle of, well, whatever you want to call it. I mean, you got your pandemic, you got your quarantine, you got whatever. Anyway, I'm here with you live. I believe it's the 20th day of May. And tonight's show is, well, they're all about deliciousness, but I want to take this opportunity to share with you some stories about places around the world where I have experienced deliciousness. And let me tell you what the context here is. There's not a lot of people flying these days. There's no business that has been more kind of disrupted than the travel and hospitality business. People aren't getting on planes at this point very much. They're not checking into their hotels in foreign countries. So that business has been on hold. And I got to tell you something. As a guy that loves traveling and going to places, wherever, anywhere in the world, in our own country. I do miss it, you know, I do miss it, but, in the 12 months preceding this situation that we find ourselves in, I actually ended up doing more travel to more places than at any time in my very long life. It's a coincidence. It's just totally lucky. I got lucky because in a way I was almost ready to take a break. I'm going to tell you about 22 places that I have been in the 12 months leading up to this, quarantine pandemic, this not traveling thing anymore. And I'm telling you that not for my benefit, but rather because I'm starting to fantasize about what it's going to be like to travel again. Like, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? What do we have to look forward to? And I think one of the things that you take away from this whole crisis, for lack of a better word, is, hey, you know what? Life is short. Let me do whatever I'm going to do now. And so as a guy that recommends things for a living, things to eat, places to go, restaurants, recipes, foods, etc., etc., etc. Tonight's show is dedicated to recommending places to travel when we can travel again. You know, I'm not calling it bucket list stuff. I'm just telling you that I can recall 22 places that I went within the year right before we got to this, you better stop getting on planes these days. I actually canceled. I was in the middle of, where was I? It was late February. I was in the middle of Iceland, and the next flight from Iceland was going to take me to Copenhagen, where I've been, and then on to Berlin, where I have not. And that's when all of a sudden the news came out that there was going to be this, that there was this problem. And in fact, I ended up coming home from Iceland rather than continuing on to Copenhagen and Germany because it looked like too risky to do that. But I'm here to tell you that I went to some places along the way that were extraordinary, including some of the best experiences that I ever had in my life. So this show is dedicated to my kind of recollection with an eye towards kind of recommending places that you may consider when it's time to go out and travel again. And it starts in last March, when I was invited, because some of these trips I'm invited to actually in terms of, their public relations. Somebody is saying, come to my place or my country or my hotel or my vineyard or whatever, and you're going to end up reporting on it, so great. Others of these places I go because I have an opportunity as the husband of someone who also is in the travel business. So my wife might say to me, hey, I've got this trip to Germany, as an example, to this travel convention, and do you want to come with me? Yes, I do. And then there's a couple of trips that you make here just on your own as a vacation because you're a travel enthusiast. And it started for me last March when I was invited to a place called Punta Mita in Mexico. I've been in Mexico many times, most of them because I had done business down there in the advertising business. A lot of that, of course, takes place in Mexico City, fine. But I've also been there many times on vacation, and this one was a press trip. Come on down and visit us in Punta Mita and report on that. The flight takes you into Puerto Vallarta. There are certain times of the year that you might be able, depending on where you're coming from, to fly directly into Puerto Vallarta. Other times you may fly through Dallas. In any case, you get to Puerto Vallarta, and as soon as you get off the plane, and by the way, all of this stuff is in my head. I have literally zero notes on this. This is all out of my recollection. But the first thing I remember getting off the plane in Puerto Vallarta, not only, that you have to go through the usual, customs and rigmarole and all that kind of stuff, and the border, and all that, whatever. They're handing out free shots of tequila at the airport. The ride to Punta Mita is approximately 45 minutes from the airport in Puerto Vallarta. Nothing particularly distinguishing about that ride. Puerto Vallarta is interesting. I'm going to say about 1,100. No, not Puerto Vallarta. Punta Mita. About 1,100 acres, maybe 1,500. It doesn't matter. It's an area that is privately owned and privately held, and what you people would consider, or what we'd all consider, to be kind of a private, gated area. Like, not just anybody is popping into Punta Mita. You have to be a guest of Punta Mita to get into this particular, I think, 1,500 acres, which is astonishingly beautiful, overlooking the water. And I would say that, just to put it into some kind of geographical perspective, Mexico has, I believe it's 31 states. The United States, if you will, of Mexico. And one of those states is, one of those states is the state that I'm in, the state of, it'll come back to me, it doesn't matter. One of those states is about 110 miles of coastline on the Pacific Ocean, and within that is Punta Mita. The hotels that form kind of the basis of Punta Mita are high-end. I mean, there's the St. Regis Hotel and there's the Four Seasons. So if you're going to vacation there, it is going to be not inexpensive. And the only reason I'm not telling you precisely what the rates are at this place or any of the places that I'll refer to is because I have no clue. You have to kind of look that stuff up. It changes by season. The state, by the way, is called Nayarit. Nayarit. Like I said, about 110 miles of Pacific coastline, so the west coast of Mexico, within which are a variety of different kind of cities and places that you can go visit. Not the least of which is this, I believe it's, I want to say 1,500 acres of private, kind of gated Punta Mita, anchored by the St. Regis Hotel and the Four Seasons, both of which are super high-end hotels. And because All You Can Eat is a podcast about deliciousness, the first thing that I would like to point out is, it's delicious. Like, you pull into the lobby of the hotel and they hand you, I think, two things, like a cold washcloth, so that you can wipe your brow and clean your face and rub your hands a little bit. And a cocktail made of some juice, which you can have with or without tequila. That was an easy one for me. And because I arrive in the afternoon, I can't help but notice not only just a glorious sun setting over the water, just freaking beautiful, but a huge platter of homemade, fresh-made guacamole and chips. And I'm going to be the first to tell you that I have a little bit of an addiction to chips. Whether it's, I'm more like chips and salsa, but even chips just with some guacamole. Well, and there's always salsa. If they're serving chips and guacamole, you know there's going to be salsa there. I've stayed at both of these resorts. The St. Regis, super elegant, beautiful rooms, maybe a little bit more, let's say, adult, intimate than the Four Seasons. But the Four Seasons is fabulous, just great. The only thing about the Four Seasons is that you tend to have, if I'm not reading it wrong, you tend to have maybe a little bit more, families there. But I'll tell you, the Four Seasons was brilliant about it because they had a pool that was literally like, okay, here's the pool if you have a whole family, and then there was a private pool among many. I don't know how many pools there were. There were multiple pools. There was one pool that was like, you're not 18, you're not coming in. And everywhere you looked at the Four Seasons, because that was the place that I stayed this particular time, you're going to get great food and great tequila. So recommendation number one, aside from the state of Nayarit, the resort area of Punta Mita, the hotel of the Four Seasons, or the St. Regis, is the tequila, which was a Don Julio. I like Reposado, but they were serving this Don Julio that was crystal clear. Never had anything like it. It was a Reposado, but it was clear. Fantastic. Rooms, lovely. Grounds, just gorgeous. Everything overlooking the water. Sunsets that were, Instagram worthy every single night. I don't think the temperature deviated that much, from between 78 to 80 degrees every single day. The water was beautiful. They happened to have at Punta Mita a couple of these golf courses. I didn't play, but I've seen the golf courses that Jack Nicklaus designed, spectacular. And the food was, particularly at the Four Seasons, the food was noteworthy. I mean, just fantastic. Multiple bars, multiple restaurants. One of the restaurants may be like kind of like an Asian influenced. One was like purely Mexican and grilled food. Another was contemporary. Like 4 different restaurants to choose from every single night. Beautiful food. And the thing is that the food is coming from that water right there. Right? You can't get fresher fish. And if you take a fresh piece of snapper and you throw it on the grill and you start to hit it up with some Mexican flavors like tomato, jalapeno, cilantro, it's just, I would go to Punta Mita anytime, any place, with anybody. I just loved it out there. One of the things I did, I'm going to tell you 3 of the things I did because that's how much I loved. Of the many places that I spent in last year, this is one of the 3 or 4 extraordinary ones. One of the things I did was I went fishing. You are listening to a guy that would not consider himself to be a fisherman, but I saw that there was an opportunity to take like a little private kind of, just a couple of us out on a boat and go fishing. I never in my life had a fishing experience like this. The rod, the line went in the water. I was pulling up fish. Not only edible, not only beautiful like snapper and that, but like eel and just these. I never had bigger. I never had more. As a fishing experience, extraordinary, and he was the great part of it. Like at some point on the way back to the dock, they take one of these fish, they cut it up, they put in some lime juice, some onion, some jalapeno, and we're eating ceviche on board. That was one experience. Another experience out there was I went shopping at a fish market with the chef, with the on-site chef. Hey, let's go shopping. We'll pick up some fresh seafood and fish coming in from these waters right here, and we go back to the kitchen and make it. Fantastic. And another experience is a class in a 1 hour, 1.5 hour class in mezcal. In fact, hang on one second. Tonight's drink, mezcal. Punta Mita, Mexico. You got the time, you got the budget, you got a flight, you cannot go wrong there. The next trip, my friends, was Paris, France, and it turns out also that I have been to Paris, France, a lot of times. Just a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean, I don't know, 25 to 30 times. I spent, 20, 25 years in the international advertising business. There was a dozen meetings that I had in Paris. Then there were a couple of vacations there, including my very first honeymoon with my very first wife. I'm never disappointed in Paris. If you've been, you understand why. I know that there are some people that are, I don't know, I want to say tentative is the word. And there's some people that go, I don't know if I want to, I heard, the French people, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm sorry. If you look at the top countries in the world for tourists and tourism, the number one place in the world is France. And obviously the number one driver is Paris. And it's because Paris as a city is extraordinary. Most extraordinary in its beauty. I mean, you drive around Paris at night, you're looking around, you're going, I can't think of a better looking city than this. Just beautiful, the architecture. And when we talk about delicious, I don't have to tell you, my friends, you are listening to a graduate of a culinary school using the French technique. In spite of the fact that I love kind of the simplicity and the beauty of Italian food, the French have done more in the world of the culinary arts than anybody. If you're in France, you're eating well. And you're eating well whether it's meat or whether it's French fries or whether it's cheese or whether it's wine or whether it's chocolate or whether it's ice cream. Ladies and gentlemen, Paris, France, you can do no wrong. I've never been disappointed there, no matter how many times I've been there, including, by the way, spending sometimes entire days doing nothing more than putting on the absolute most comfortable shoes that I can and walking and walking and walking. I will walk from 10 in the morning to 6 at night. That's after having had a couple of cups of super strong coffee and a beautiful baguette, maybe a piece of cheese. And I'm happy spending 8 hours walking around that place, looking, smelling, stopping at 4 o'clock at a wine bar, taking a couple of pictures of the Eiffel Tower. I mean, come on. It's France, people, and it's Paris, and it's great. From there, I ended up in Sevilla, Spain. Now, I have been to Spain before, not nearly as many times. I've been to Madrid. I've been to Barcelona. This time around, it was a short time in Madrid. And if you look at Spain, the second most popular city in the world for, the most popular country in the world for tourists, data, fact, France number 1, Spain number 2 in terms of total number of people showing up in a country. There are 3 big cities in Spain, Madrid being the biggest, Barcelona the second, Sevilla being somewhere on that list. And Madrid is a big city. Madrid is not unlike a New York City. Like, it's big, it's where business takes place, it's where finance is happening. It's you're going to get some amazing museums. Obviously, you're going to have some great food. But then you go to Barcelona and you go, well, Barcelona's some fun, man, because there's some nightlife going on here and there's some water here. And there's just great things happening in Barcelona. And then there's Sevilla, which is a little bit quieter, a little bit more intimate, a little bit more charming, and I love this place. So if you're looking to places to go, and you go, well, we've never been to Spain. Trust me when I tell you, you go to Spain. And I think it's worth certainly hanging out in Barcelona. I think you have to kind of stop into Madrid, even if you just fly there for a couple of days. There's some great museums, and it's a very sophisticated place and whatever. But Sevilla, man, that's fun. That's just, that's a city that you can walk. That's a city that you can hop on a bike. That's a city that's you can, in fact, bike on the water. And if you go the right time of year, and I'm there, late March, it's lovely. Lovely. And gardens and flowers, and everywhere you look, tapas. 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, you're going out, you pop into a bar, you order a glass of something, and a dish of those shrimp look good, or that potato little thing looks good. I mean, Sevilla is just delightful. Easy to navigate, nice people, great food, beautiful things to see. Always happy, well, when I say always, I don't think I've been there more than once. Happy in Spain, and all those places were great. Loved Sevilla. Loved Sevilla. From there, my next trip was quite fascinating because I ended up in Indonesia. Indonesia's foreign sounding, isn't it? And it's also pretty damn far, because when I went to Indonesia, and I'm going to say, I don't remember if it was April or May of last year, but I can tell you this, the flight from New York to Singapore, Newark actually, to be more precise, to Singapore, was at that moment the very longest nonstop flight you could take in the world. 18 hours and 45 minutes. We might have made it in 18 and a half. Now you're saying to yourself, I know, I've been there. Do I really want to be on a plane for 18 and a half hours? And the answer is drugs. The answer is drugs. And also a semi-comfortable seat, which is to say that even if you want to not spend the money that it takes to fly over to a place in business class, which you would if you could, Singapore Air had a class of service that I believe was a little bit better than, coach. It was like premium coach. And I made it. I don't know, 18 and a half, 18:45, whatever it was, and I felt pretty good about it. Not a lot of leg room, not a lot of, I would do it again. And why would I do it again? Because there were two places that I ended up with, both of which I could conceivably go back again in spite of the length of that flight. So I went for two places, Bali and Singapore, neither of which I had been to before, and that was part of the appeal for me. As a variety junkie, one of my goals in life is to always find something new to explore. That's me. I get that people oftentimes want to go to a place they've been before. They don't want to necessarily go too far out of the comfort zone. I'm hearing that there's an opportunity to go to Bali, and I go, I've heard a lot about Bali. I wouldn't mind going. And Singapore sounds interesting to me too. But yeah, I mean, even after the 18:30, 18:45 to Singapore, then you got to wait at the airport for an hour or so. For your flight to Bali, it's another 2 hours. And then after you get to Bali, of course, you got to go through the thing. You get to the car, and I end up in a town called Canggu, just as you would expect to spell it, Canggu, at a hotel called the Como, Como. It's the Como in Canggu. And the Como's a great hotel, and it's a great little hotel kind of chain, like one of those mini little, we have 18 different hotels around the part of the world, but they're first class. On the water, doing really nice stuff, and healthy, and, high class, first class service. But I got to be perfectly blunt about Canggu. One of the things that it's known for is probably, it's one of the best places in the world to go if you're the type of person that can do your work on a computer. Like, it's just known for that. People just show up in Canggu and they become kind of business people on a computer, and Canggu's a great place because you're right on the water and people go surfing and whatever. But, I'm a guy from New York, and I think what a lot of people may forget is that in these United States of America, in terms of how, beaches go, the East Coast beaches are among certainly the best in this country. So, whether you're talking about Florida or whether you're talking about Long Island or whether you're talking about the beaches up in Massachusetts along Cape Cod and all that kind of stuff, we have great beaches here. And certainly, I would never disparage the California beaches, even though they're not quite as beautiful as what we have on the East Coast. When I got to Cancun, I'm looking out on the water, and the water's fine. But those beaches, you're not traveling 18 and a half hours to go to Cancun. I mean, I'm not. I'm not going back to Cancun because they have a lovely beach. I got better beaches here. But after a couple of days in Cancun, I end up at the Como in a town called Ubud. Wait a second. Kidding me with this? Ubud is like, I don't know. It's like no place that I've been. It's Ubud is not like a lot of other places, but more. The Como Hotel in Ubud is one of the greatest top 5, top 10 resorts I've ever stayed in my life. It was like almost out of body. And the experience there that was most kind of memorable to me was the bike trip. I love getting on a bike in a foreign place, whether it's biking around Sevilla or biking around Paris, or in this case, biking around Ubud. The Ubud trip was you get in a little minivan, and essentially you drive up to what is the peak there, like thousands of feet up, and they hand you a mountain bike. And that up may take you 45 minutes to an hour. You stop overlooking a volcano. You have a lovely breakfast in a fantastic place, and eventually you end up kind of at the top of a mountain, and you get yourself on a mountain bike, and you face down, and you don't pedal for the next 2 hours. I mean, this is downhill biking at its absolute best through kind of rice paddies and and farmland and water and local and temples, and wow, I'd never seen anything like that. That was unbelievable. So you can take a long trip to Bali. You do want to end up at one of the great resorts in Ubud, whether it's Como or the Four Seasons or whatever. And again, this is money, all right? So I'm not saying this is not one of those bucket list trips, but whoa, I don't know, man. That was unforgettable and spectacular. Spectacular. And from there, before you get back to New York, you got a couple of days. No, more than a couple of days. 4 or 5 days in Singapore. I mean, what is Singapore? It's an island, it's a country, it's everything. It's an island, a country, and a city. And I'm there in, I want to say, May, and it's 1,000 degrees. I think that if I looked at the thermometer, it's 1,000 degrees. I remember walking outside in Singapore in a T-shirt, and within about 2 minutes of walking, my T-shirt was wet. And the only way to get any kind of relief was to go inside, where the air conditioning in every single mall, everywhere you went, was blowing at about, it was like 60 degrees. Like you literally went from 120 and humid into 60. You would dry off, leave a little puddle somewhere, and move on. But I'm going to tell you this about Singapore. Of the top 5 places that I've ever eaten in the world, Singapore is easily number 1. And part of what makes Singapore one of the great places in the world is the diversity of the food. You know, we talk about New York a lot, and we're proud of the fact that you can have Italian, you can have French, you can have Korean. I mean, you know, obviously there's cultures from all over the world. It doesn't, you just name it, we got it. Well, it's the same thing in Singapore, except that they're dealing with a slightly different palette of flavors, right? So there's going to be Korean, there's going to be Japanese, Malaysian. I mean, the food there is out of control. They love their food. It's not expensive. Some of it is like street food. Some of it is like hawker markets. I actually am looking forward. I know that it's 18 and a half hours on a plane. I would go back to Singapore for no reason other than to spend 5 days eating that again. I remember in my 5 days, I had 15 different types of cuisine in Singapore, my friends. Yes, it was hot. Yes, it's a long flight. And yes, I would go back because you are tasting incredible flavors from the world over. Just beautiful eating. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful food. Chinese, Japanese, Thai, Vietnamese, dumplings, noodles, rice, dosa, pancake, blah, blah, blah. Oh, my God, that was fantastic eating. God, that was good. In June, as we move around the world, I don't know about you, I'm starting to get hungry here. In June, I go on a cruise. Now, this is a vacation, and I'm not going to present myself as like hey, I'm a cruise guy. I spent a lot of time in my life going, I would never go on a cruise, until I went on a cruise, and I go, hey, you know what, this actually suits me, and I'll tell you why. Because as a variety junkie, one of the things about a cruise is that oftentimes they make multiple stops. I like that. I'm not in one place for too long. The second thing is that there's two different kind of cruises, and this last year I went out on both kinds, one being like kind of enormous. There's 3,000 people on board. I'll tell you about that later. That's November. But here in June, this is a smaller thing. Seabourn is one of those cruise lines that is smaller. I don't know, I'm going to say maybe 500 people on board, or however many it was. So it's a high end, it's more expensive. But I was intrigued, we were intrigued by the itinerary through what they call the Adriatic. It starts off in Athens, Greece, and then it moves you through that part of the world. I'm going to get to that, but let's start in Athens, because you fly into Athens. Never been there before. And when you're in Athens in June, again, it wasn't quite Singapore, but it was freaking hot. But I'll tell you what. So it's hot. And you're going to go see some ruins. You're going to see the Colosseum, because it's worth seeing a building that's still 2,000 years later. 2,000 years later is still somewhat standing. And you're going to find yourself in the, what do they call it, the cradle, the birthplace of democracy. Democracy is a Greek concept, where the idea was that everybody would have an opportunity to speak. And they did that in Athens, Greece. You would go into some auditorium, a Greek word, and you would speak your piece. And you're going to eat some lamb in Athens, Greece. And if you're lucky, you'll get to do what my highlight was. I went to a concert. I think it was the Greek National Symphony, I want to say. And it was in an outdoor auditorium, an outdoor space. It held close to 5,000 people. There was no microphone in sight, and even sitting in the last row, the sound that you were able to get in a space that had been designed outdoors thousands of years ago was perfect. I just won't forget that one. Beautiful night, classical music, seated outside on hard surface, listening to music at a perfect level without one touch of electronic amplification. The first stop in the cruise, which started in Athens, was in a place called Santorini. And in my whole life, I had never been to Greece. This was very exciting. And if you look up Santorini, you're looking at pictures that basically are an intense blue in the middle of the sea. And the homes are white and the sea is blue, and it is gorgeous, stunning, just spectacular. And we were lucky enough to find our way to a place, because, you ask some people, hey, if we were going to eat something here for lunch, whatever. Yeah, well, if you go here. And we end up at a place on, a restaurant on the water. I mean, you could jump from your table into the sea. And it turns out that the waitress is also the wife of the owner, and we say, what's fresh? Well, everything is fresh, but if you want to come into the kitchen and pick your fish out of the tank, you could certainly go ahead and do that. You got octopus? Yeah, we'll take that. What kind of fish? Well, we've got some snapper, grilled that. You got a beautiful, salad with tomato and feta, and, oh, man. Santorini was gorgeous. Gorgeous. And to get there, you got to take like a cable car up the mountain, and to get back, maybe you're lucky enough to get on a little boat or whatever. Just beautiful. Next stop on the cruise is the country called Croatia, and I had always wanted to go. Now, here's the good news and the bad news about the crew. I'm going to make 2 stops in Croatia, each one for like 6 hours, because that's the way these cruises work. They pull in the morning, they give you till the night, get your butt back on the ship and move on. One of the stops is in Dubrovnik. You get off your cruise line, and you either tender and you take a little boat into the port, or maybe you're lucky enough to park somewhere and you get off and you. Dubrovnik, to me, spotless and stunning and like almost Disneyland-ish. Like, I was at 2 cities in Croatia. One was Dubrovnik and one was called Zadar. And while I wouldn't mind going back to Croatia, because I'm hearing that the food and the drink of the country is beautiful, Dubrovnik was Disneyland-ish, super expensive, but glad that I had a chance to see it. Spent a bunch of money to walk around the old city. A lot of these places have like kind of like the old city, like old walls, and we walked on top of the walls all around. I mean, it's just beautiful. But I don't feel like I really had a chance to explore Croatia in the way that I want to. The next stop, however, was in a place called Kotor, in a country called Montenegro. And you go, Montenegro, what's that? Well, it's over there with Croatia. It's over in that part of the Adriatic Sea. And you wake up in the morning, and you open up the window in your little cabin on the ship, and you're in a place called the Bay of Kotor, and you're looking out and you're going, this can't even be real. How something could be so... sound of music, hills. You're in the water and you're looking around and you're going, this is freaking stunning, gorgeous, beautiful. We had made the arrangements in Kotor, Montenegro, to go on a little, a bike thing called, I think, the bike of 23 turns. 23 turns. What is that? I don't know, but we went on it. They picked us up. There were bikes in the trunk, and we drove to the top of a mountain in Kotor, Montenegro. In a ride that's, it was scary. Why was it scary? Because the road to the top of the mountain in Kotor, Montenegro was a 1-lane road that accommodated 2 lanes, that accommodated traffic in 2 directions. So you're going up and other people are coming down, and every time 2 cars pass, one of them has to stop driving so the other can move around. We were nervous going up this mountain on a cliff of 23 turns overlooking the sea. But eventually, 45 minutes that felt like 45 hours, we got up to the top, they unloaded the bikes, and once again, my friends, when you're 5,000 feet in the air and somebody hands you a bike, you don't have to pedal. And we did not. And the whole way down through 23 hairpin turns on the way down, including a moment when we actually had to stop so that a tour bus could take the road going uphill. But the whole way down, the view is of that sound of music, hills, green, blue water, blue sky, like a painting. Fantastic. And I could understand that some people, you know, ain't getting on a bike. I mean, you're 87 years old, you're not getting on a bike. You're 57 years old, though, or younger, or whatever you are. And you can hop on a bike and go downhill for 2 hours in some of the most spectacular setting you've ever seen. And we end up at the bottom, and then you pop into a restaurant, you have some lovely Croatian wine, a lovely Croatian meal on the water. Hello. I like it. I like it. I recommend it. And the final stop on this particular cruise, it was a place called Venice, Italy, which, you know, strangely enough, has been in the news a lot lately because it turns out that with people not showing up in Venice, or anywhere for that matter, where they get, like, I don't know, 30 million odd visitors a year in Venice. In fact, it was known as a place that was kind of guilty, if you will, of what they call over-tourism. I mean, there were a lot of people show up in Venice. Like, if you go to Venice in prime time, it's not for me. I don't like I don't like crowds. All right, I'm claustrophobic. But in June, not so bad in Venice. And what I'm going to tell you is that while now Venice ain't getting any one of the 33 million people, I'm not sure they've even opened it up yet, what they've noticed over this last 9 weeks of hiatus, of quarantine, is that there are now, you know, jellyfish in the water, and the water is looking better, and I mean, everything is better right now in Venice than has been before. So when it comes time to travel again, my friends, you may want to consider, if you haven't been, what makes Venice Venice is that there's no other place like it in the world. I mean, this is a city where you're living on the water. You get around this city on a gondola, on a boat. You want to shop for vegetables, they're bringing it in you're shopping off a boat. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's not like any other place. It's almost not real. But you're also, by the way, in Italy, which means that in addition to being just fantastic to kind of walk around, or to take a water taxi somewhere, or to get on a gondola somewhere, or, you know, everywhere you go, you're going to have Italian food. And these people, they know how to do it, man. The food is just great, and it's delicious, and it's whatever you want. And the wine, and, you know, I had been to Venice before, and I didn't like it the first time I was there. I felt like it was almost too much of a trap. I felt like somebody was trying to take advantage. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, I was there this past June, right before the peak of tourist season, and Venice was just lovely. Lovely. Just great to be there. Beautiful, again, you know, you're one of those people that likes to go to a church, you got that. You want to sit outside in a piazza, in a plaza, and have an Aperol Spritz, great. You want to go to a concert at night, super. You want to I went on a little tour of Cicchette, Little Bites. You know, it's like like there, you go on a tour of these bars that'll serve you some, you know, like whatever your favorite kind of cocktail is, whether it's wine or it's a Spritz, with little dishes, little sandwiches, little bites. God, it was great. Great to be in Venice. Next stop, my friends, the United States of America, Madison, Wisconsin. Hello, Madison. Been there, I don't know, more than a dozen times. I'm a fan of Madison. It's not necessarily like the rest of Wisconsin in that maybe it's a little bit more of a kind of a what you would call like a liberal enclave, because there's a big University of Wisconsin campus there. You're on a lake. The State House is fantastic to look at and to tour. It's beautiful. The food and drink in Madison, Wisconsin is just extraordinary. There are two reasons that I would go to Madison, Wisconsin. One of them is happy hour. These people know how to party. They've got great food. It's all made with local supplies. They make their own cheese. They have unbelievable farms. This is, after all, America's dairyland. And the other reason you go to Madison, Wisconsin, for me, is one of the top 5 or 10 farmers markets in the country. Saturday morning, right around that Capitol building, you can spend hours just taking in the onions and the cheese and the vegetables and the fruits and the cheese bread, and on a lovely Saturday morning before the football game, before the tailgating starts. Madison, Wisconsin, always happy to be there. From there, it was back to Madrid. I'm invited on another press trip to a resort 2 hours outside of Madrid called Abadía del Retuerte. Again, this one shows up last year as one of the great places. It's a 13th century monastery that they've converted into a resort hotel on a couple of thousand acres of vineyards. I don't even know what more you can ask for. The place is glorious to look at. They're making wine. Everything you want that you could possibly want is there. Again, hop on a bike, go on a tour of the vineyards, crush yourself some grapes, do a wine tasting, Michelin star eating on campus. Abadía del Retuerte, that's a special resort, highly recommended, and again, not like a lot of other places. In the area of the world where they are harvesting Tempranillo, so there's a lot of grapes growing. I was fortunate enough to be there during harvest season, so they're picking the grapes. I ended up stomping on grapes in my bare feet. You can't argue with that. So if you're going to go, certainly that time of year, September, is the time to go. And on the way back from Abadía, on the 2-hour trip back to Madrid, there's a stop in Segovia. There are two things about Segovia. One is that the Romans had been there a long time ago, so that they built an aqueduct. So if you're interested in this type of architectural history, it's just freaking stunning. And right next to this beautiful structure of columns and arches and aqueduct and whatever is a restaurant that appears to be about 5 generations old, where they specialize in roasting baby pig. And I'm going to tell you this: I like a good pig. And I've had it in every form that you can have it, and I've had every part of that animal. I don't recall ever having a better piece of pig than I had right there in Segovia. I can't wait to go back there. I mean, that was freaking special. Next up in my itinerary from this period is Miami. All I want to say is, you've been there, great, you know. If you haven't, you go. I'm a big fan of the One Hotel. Again, not inexpensive, but on the beach, beautiful facilities, great gym, everything good. Next trip, I'm back to France, but this time, instead of Paris, I'm in the south of France, in the area they call Provence, or the Côte d'Azur, the Gold Coast. Made the beautiful decision to go on to that VRBO, whatever you want to call it. Booked ourselves our own flat. You know how cool it is if you're in a foreign place and you have your own little apartment? It's cool, because you feel like you live there, even though you're a tourist. And then decided that was the kind of trip. And again, this requires, I suppose, if you will, a little bit of the adventurous spirit. But my bride and I had some free time and decided to drive around without itinerary the south of France, in Provence, on the Gold Coast. So there's places there like Saint-Tropez, and there's places there like Aix-en-Provence. I wanted to just see what would happen if we showed up. And one of the places that we show up is in a hotel called Lily of the Valley, 5 minutes outside of the town of Saint-Tropez. Now, again, I'm there in December, and even in December, I'm going to tell you, those days were, 55 and 60 in the sun. I got lucky in the car that I rented. It was a convertible. And we were driving with the top down in December in the south of France. And the Lily of the Valley Hotel is a place that's probably been there since kind of the 50s or early 60s. It had gone into some state of disrepair, and they hired a guy named Philippe Starck, one of the great designers in all of France, to redo the hotel. It was amazeballs. You're on the water. Every possible detail is attended to. It is glorious. Every aspect of it, the restaurant, the bar, the gym, the pool, your room. Lily of the Valley, I want to go back. I want to go back because that place was amazing. And then from there we drive to a place called Aix-en-Provence. Charming village, town, at also another place that feels like it's been there for a couple of 100 years. That's the beauty of being in kind of like Europe. You can be in places that have been around for hundreds of years. And this one was a chateau, Chateau de la Garde, if I'm not mistaken, Garde, Chateau de la Garde, a chateau winemaking that had been there for a couple of 100 years, redone to become a resort in the middle of just a stunning part of the south of France. You're driving around. Life is good. Man, that was just a beautiful trip. I encourage anybody, if they have any sense of adventure, to go to a foreign place, rent a car, and drive around. It's much easier now than it was in the old days when all you had was kind of the paper map, because now you have a phone, you have Google Maps, you have blah blah blue. You can explore some stuff, and I think that's really where the thrill is. What can you discover on your own that hasn't really been discovered before? Or discover what somebody else has and find it on your own. From there, London, if you've been, you know. If you haven't, you want to go, because this is one of the great cities in the world. Whether it is you like theater, whether it is you like museums. Again, I'm on a bike somewhere in Hyde Park, which is fantastic. The food has gotten great over there, particularly if you go, hey, you know what, I don't want to spend a lot of money on a fancy restaurant, but I'd like to have some Indian food. Ooh, that's certainly a place to have it. I got on a bike, as I said, in Hyde Park. The gin over there. I mean, you go for a happy hour over in London, and it is literally happy hour. Next stop was in Costa Rica. All I want to say about Costa Rica is yes. From just a kind of a beauty eco tourism type of place. It's warm. It is beautiful to look at. Activities can run you anywhere from, I'm going to spend some time in the water, whether it's going to be on some kind of a boat or some type of motorized thing, to I want to get on a four-wheel drive ATV. I want to go on not hang gliding. What do they call that thing where you're hanging on some kind of wire there? You're hanging and you're going through whatever. Costa Rica, just stunning. And fun, and again, you're not going to have a problem having delicious food down there. They got it. Next stop, and again, this is kind of where was I? I was in Napa. Yeah, it was January. Napa Valley, USA. Love you. I love you, Napa Valley. I love your food. I love your wine. I love your visiting the vineyards. I love the biking. What a great part of the United States of America. Fly into San Francisco, drive an hour north, and it is glorious up there. I was up there early in this year, 2000. Even so, you put on a sweatshirt and you're biking for a couple of hours. You stop at a vineyard. You have some tasting. The food is amazing. I popped into one of those places where they sell weed. What do you call that? Dispensary. And they were like, oh, I said, I have a license. They go, no, you need a California license. So I go, okay, we'll buy. And they go, well, you don't have to leave. You can apply for one right here online and get it in 15 minutes. Well, wouldn't you know it, my friends, I managed to get myself a license to buy legalized cannabis in Napa Valley, and hello, 15 minutes later I was walking out with product. And then finally, and it was my last trip in 12 months of about 22 places that I had been, and I had never been before, and I don't know why I ended up in Iceland in the end of February when it was ice cold where I was, and we were like, what are we doing going to a place that's ice cold in the middle of February? And I mean, Iceland was just, amazing. If I have to pick the highlights, it's going to be that it's 20 degrees outside, and you're in blue water that is 100 degrees, naturally heated from the thermal springs underneath you. Drinking a glass of sparkling apple cider with a little hit of alcohol in it, and you've got a bathing suit.
You got about a minute.
Hot water, and it's cold outside, and oh my God, that was amazing. How about this one? How about getting yourself on a snowmobile and driving around a glacier? Iceland, and super just food and lovely, natural, funny, interesting people and beautiful places to go and to see, whether they were cultural or whether they were culinary. Iceland was glorious, lovely, beautiful, and a lovely culmination to 12 months of indescribably delicious travel around the world. Getting back on an airline, taking you to a place where it is, and most of the parts of the world is perfectly the same. You need more information on any of these places. You feel the connection. I'm sure over there that you know that. That's easy. In the meantime, with Father's Day coming up, you can pick up a copy of my book. It's called Short Order Dad. It's great for Father's Day. I will be back with you next week, Wednesday night live,
Uncontrollable
at 8
yelling.
o'clock, or here on iHeartRadio or on Spotify. I'm Robert Rosenthal. This is episode 80 of All You Can Eat. And remember, my friends, life is short, so never waste a meal.